The year was 1966, and the boxing world was about to witness something that would shake the very foundations of the sport. In a dimly lit gym in Miami, Florida, two titans were preparing for what many considered an impossible encounter. Muhammad Ali, the brash young heavyweight champion who had just changed his name from Cassius Clay, was about to face off against Joe Louis, the legendary brown bomber who had dominated boxing for over a decade. What started as a simple exhibition would become one of the most controversial and talked-about moments in boxing history. The humid Miami air hung thick in the Overtown Boxing Club as Ali shadowboxed in the corner, his movements fluid and graceful like a dancer. At 24, he was at the peak of his physical prowess, his confidence radiating through every jab and footwork combination. Across the gym, Joe Louis, now 42 years old, sat quietly on a wooden bench, methodically wrapping his hands. The former champion's face showed the wear of countless battles, but his eyes still held that steely determination that had made him a legend. The backstory to this unprecedented meeting began 3 months earlier when a wealthy Miami businessman named Samuel Richardson approached both fighters with an unusual proposition. Richardson, who had made his fortune in real estate, was a passionate boxing fan who believed that the sport needed something spectacular to revive interest after a series of lackluster heavyweight bouts. He offered both men a substantial sum to participate in what he called a legacy exhibition, a chance for the old guard to pass the torch to the new generation. Ali's trainer, Angelo Dundee, was initially hesitant about the arrangement. He paced nervously around the gym, constantly checking his watch and muttering under his breath about the risks involved. Louis was no ordinary opponent, even at his age. The man had defended his heavyweight title 25 times and had knocked out some of the most fearsome fighters of his era. Even past his prime, he possessed a devastating left hook that could end any fight in an instant. The negotiations had been intense and secretive. Both camps insisted on specific conditions that would protect their fighters' reputations. The bout would be limited to 6 rounds with special rules about clinching and holding. Most importantly, it would be filmed but not broadcast live, giving both sides control over how the footage would be used. The location was chosen specifically because of its privacy. The Overtown gym was known for discretion and had hosted several high-profile training sessions away from prying eyes. As word began to leak about the exhibition, the boxing community was divided. Some called it a publicity stunt, while others saw it as a historic opportunity to see 2 generations of greatness collide. Sports writers from major newspapers started making calls, trying to confirm the rumors, but both camps remained tight-lipped about the details. The morning of the exhibition arrived with an unexpected thunderstorm that seemed to mirror the tension in the air. Ali arrived at the gym early, accompanied by his usual entourage of supporters and hangers-on. He was unusually quiet, spending most of his time studying footage of Louis's recent sparring sessions. His usual pre-fight bravado was replaced by a focused intensity that surprised even his closest associates. Louis arrived exactly on time, as was his custom throughout his career. He brought only his longtime trainer Jack Blackburn and a single cornerman. The contrast between the two camps was striking. Ali's group was loud and energetic, while Louis's team moved with the quiet efficiency of seasoned professionals who had been through countless big fights together. The gym had been cleared of all spectators except for a handful of trusted individuals. Richardson sat in a folding chair near the ring, nervously adjusting his tie as he watched the 2 legends prepare. A single camera operator, sworn to secrecy, positioned his equipment to capture every moment of what was about to unfold. As both fighters began their final preparations, the atmosphere in the gym became electric. Ali started his usual routine of verbal sparring, but his comments were more respectful than usual. He acknowledged Louis's legendary status while still maintaining his characteristic confidence. Louis, true to his reserved nature, simply nodded and continued his methodical warm-up routine. The moment arrived when both fighters stepped into the ring for the traditional pre-fight instructions. Standing face to face, the generational gap was evident, not just in their ages, but in their fighting styles and approaches to the sport. Ali bounced on his toes, his hands moving constantly, while Louis stood perfectly still, his gaze fixed and unwavering. What happened next would be debated by boxing historians for decades to come. As the makeshift referee called for the fighters to touch gloves, Ali extended his hand with his usual flair, but Louis's response was unexpected. Instead of the customary tap, the older fighter gripped Ali's glove firmly and held it for several seconds, his eyes never leaving the younger man's face. It was a moment of mutual respect that transcended their different personalities and backgrounds. The bell rang for the first round, and immediately it was clear that this would be unlike any exhibition either man had ever participated in. Ali came out with his signature style, dancing and moving, throwing quick jabs to establish distance and rhythm. But Louis, despite his age, showed flashes of the devastating power that had made him champion. His movements were more deliberate now, but each punch carried the weight of experience and precision timing. The first meaningful exchange came 90 seconds into the round, when Ali attempted one of his lightning-fast combinations. Louis slipped the first two punches with veteran savvy, then countered with a left hook that caught Ali on the shoulder. The impact sent a visible shock through the younger fighter, reminding everyone present that they were witnessing something far more serious than a casual sparring session. Ali's response was immediate and impressive. He increased his movement, using his superior speed and reach to keep Louis at bay while landing several clean jabs. But the older fighter's ring intelligence was evident as he cut off angles and forced Ali into corners where his mobility was limited. The chess match between youth and experience was playing out in real time. As the round progressed, both fighters began to settle into a rhythm that showcased their respective strengths. Ali's footwork was poetry in motion, but Louis's economy of movement and perfect positioning demonstrated why he had been such a dominant champion. Every punch thrown by the brown bomber was calculated and purposeful, while Ali's volume and speed created a constant threat. The end of the first round brought both fighters back to their corners, where their teams provided different types of advice. Dundee urged Ali to stick to his game plan and avoid getting drawn into Louis's preferred fighting distance. Meanwhile, Blackburn reminded Louis to be patient and wait for his opportunities, knowing that one perfectly timed punch could change everything. The second round began with increased intensity from both fighters. Ali seemed more confident now, having tested Louis's reflexes and found them slightly diminished from their peak. He began to open up with longer combinations, his famous hand, speed on full display, but Louis was far from finished, and his counter-punching ability remained sharp enough to make Ali pay for any careless moments. Midway through the second round, the exhibition took a dramatic turn that nobody had anticipated. Ali, perhaps emboldened by his early success, attempted a particularly ambitious combination that left him momentarily off balance. Louis, with the instincts that had served him throughout his career, recognized the opening immediately and launched a devastating left hook that caught Ali flush on the jaw. The sound of the punch echoed through the small gym like a gunshot. Ali's legs buckled, and for a terrifying moment it appeared that the young champion might go down. The few witnesses present held their breath as Ali stumbled backward, his famous reflexes the only thing keeping him upright. Louis, showing the killer instinct that had made him legendary, immediately pressed forward to capitalize on his advantage. What followed was perhaps the most intense 30 seconds of boxing ever captured on film during an exhibition. Louis unleashed a barrage of punches with the precision and power that had terrorized heavyweight divisions for years. Ali, fighting purely on instinct, managed to cover up and move just enough to avoid the most devastating shots, but several clean punches found their mark. The younger fighter's recovery was remarkable to witness, drawing on reserves of strength and determination that would define his entire career. Ali managed to clinch and hold until his head cleared. When they separated, his eyes had regained their focus, and the cocky smile that had become his trademark slowly returned to his face. The third round began with a palpable shift in atmosphere. Both fighters now understood that what had started as an exhibition had evolved into something much more significant. Ali's near knockdown had awakened something primal in both men, and the respectful sparring session had transformed into a genuine test of wills and abilities. Ali came out for the third round with renewed focus and determination. The close call in the previous round had served as a wake-up call, reminding him that he was facing a man who had knocked out champions and contenders alike. His movement became more purposeful, less showy, as he began to implement the lessons his trainer had drilled into him about fighting older, more experienced opponents. Lewis, meanwhile, seemed energized by his success in the second round. The taste of landing a significant punch on the young champion had rekindled the competitive fire that had driven him to greatness. His footwork, which had appeared labored in the early going, now showed flashes of the smooth efficiency that had characterized his prime years. The tactical battle that unfolded in the third round was a masterclass in boxing intelligence. Ali began to use his jab more effectively, not just as a rangefinder, but as a weapon to disrupt Lewis's timing and rhythm. He varied the speed and placement of his punches, sometimes snapping quick jabs to the head, other times driving longer, harder shots to the body. Lewis responded with the patience and ring savvy that had made him one of the greatest champions in boxing history. He began to time Ali's movements, studying the patterns in the younger fighter's footwork and hand positioning. When Ali would lean back to avoid a punch, Louis was there with a counter. When Ali tried to circle away, Lewis cut off the ring with subtle steps that demonstrated decades of experience. The crowd of witnesses, though small, could feel the electricity building in the gym. Richardson sat forward in his chair, his business concerns forgotten as he watched two legends push each other to their limits. The camera operator, initially focused on simply documenting the event, found himself caught up in the drama unfolding before his lens. Halfway through the third round, Ali attempted to reassert his dominance with a flurry of punches that showcased his incredible hand speed. The combination was beautiful to watch. A left jab followed by a straight right, then a left hook to the body, and finishing with an uppercut that just missed Lewis's chin. But the older fighter's defensive skills remained sharp, and he managed to slip or block most of the shots while positioning himself for a counter-attack. Louis's response was swift and devastating. As Ali's combination ended, leaving the younger fighter slightly extended, Louis stepped forward and delivered a perfectly timed right hand to Ali's midsection. The punch landed with a thud that could be heard throughout the gym, and Ali's face contorted in pain as he felt the full force of Lewis's legendary power. The body shot had an immediate effect on Ali's movement. His dancing became less fluid, his breathing more labored. Louis, recognizing the opportunity, began to systematically target Ali's body with short, chopping punches that sapped the younger fighter's energy and mobility. It was a veteran strategy, designed to break down an opponent over time, rather than seeking a single knockout blow. Ali's corner watched with growing concern as their fighter struggled to maintain his usual rhythm. Dundee shouted instructions about moving laterally and using his reach advantage, but Lewis's pressure was relentless. The older fighter had found his range and timing, and he was making the most of every opportunity. The fourth round opened with both fighters showing the effects of their intense battle. Ali's face bore the marks of Lewis's accurate punching, while the older fighter's breathing had become more pronounced. but neither man showed any inclination to ease up on the intensity that had made this exhibition so compelling. Ali made a conscious decision to change his strategy for the fourth round. Instead of relying solely on his mobility and speed, he began to stand his ground more often, meeting Lewis's advances with solid punches of his own. The shift in tactics surprised Louis, who had been expecting Ali to continue moving and boxing from the outside. The new approach led to several heated exchanges in the center of the ring. Ali's youth and strength began to show as he landed several hard shots to Lewis's head and body. The older fighter absorbed the punishment with the stoicism that had characterized his entire career, but the accumulation of punches was beginning to take its toll. Louis's response demonstrated why he had been such a dominant champion for so many years. Instead of wilting under Ali's assault, he dug deeper into his reserves of experience and determination. His punches became more selective but more powerful, each one thrown with the intention of ending the fight, or at least shifting the momentum back in his direction. The most dramatic moment of the fourth round came when both fighters threw simultaneous right hands that landed at exactly the same time. The double impact sent both men staggering backward, their legs momentarily unsteady. For a few seconds, it appeared that both fighters might go down, creating a scenario that nobody had anticipated when the exhibition was first planned. Both men recovered quickly, but the exchange had clearly taken something out of each fighter. Ali's usual bounce was less pronounced, while Louis's movements had become more deliberate and measured. The pace of the fight slowed slightly, as both fighters took a moment to reassess their situations and strategies. The final 2 rounds of the exhibition would prove to be the most memorable and controversial. As the 5th round began, both fighters seemed to realize that they were participating in something that would be remembered long after the final bell. The intensity remained high, but there was also a sense of mutual respect that had grown throughout their battle. Ali began the 5th round by returning to his original game plan of movement and boxing from the outside. His jab was sharp and accurate, keeping Lewis at bay while scoring points, but the older fighter's experience showed as he continued to cut off the ring and force exchanges in close quarters where his power advantage was most pronounced. The round featured several momentum swings that kept the small audience on the edge of their seats. Ali would establish control with his superior speed and reach, only to have Lewis counter with a perfectly timed punch that reminded everyone of his devastating power. The ebb and flow of the action created a dramatic tension that neither fighter had expected when they agreed to the exhibition. As the 5th round drew to a close, both fighters seemed to sense that they were running out of time to make a definitive statement. Ali increased his output, throwing combinations with the speed and precision that had made him famous. Lewis responded with the methodical pressure that had worn down so many opponents throughout his legendary career. The 6th and final round began with both fighters showing remarkable conditioning for what was supposed to be a light exhibition. Ali came out with renewed energy, perhaps drawing on the knowledge that he only had 3 minutes left to prove his superiority over the legendary former champion. His movement was crisp, his punches sharp and accurate. Louis, meanwhile, fought with the desperation of a man who knew this might be his last chance to show the boxing world that he still possessed the skills that had made him great. His punches carried extra force, thrown with the knowledge that he needed to make every shot count in the limited time remaining. The final round featured some of the most intense action of the entire exhibition. Both fighters abandoned any pretense of holding back, throwing punches with bad intentions and genuine competitive fire. Ali's speed was matched against Lewis's power and experience in a battle that transcended the original purpose of their meeting. With 1 minute remaining in the final round, Lewis landed a left hook that staggered Ali and sent the crowd into a frenzy. The younger fighter's legs wobbled, but his recovery was immediate and impressive. Instead of retreating, Ali stepped forward and engaged Louis in a toe-to-toe exchange that brought both fighters to the brink of exhaustion. The final 30 seconds of the exhibition were fought at a pace that seemed impossible for two men who had already been battling for nearly 18 minutes. Both fighters threw everything they had left, creating a crescendo of action that would be talked about for decades to come. When the final bell rang, both fighters stood in the center of the ring, their arms raised not in victory, but in mutual acknowledgement of what they had accomplished together. The exhibition had become something neither man had expected, a genuine test of their abilities and a passing of the torch from one generation to the next. The immediate aftermath of the exhibition was marked by confusion and controversy. The footage captured that day was so intense and competitive that both camps initially agreed it should never be released. The boxing commissions were concerned about the precedent it might set for future exhibitions, while the fighters themselves were unsure about how the public would react to what they had witnessed. Richardson, the businessman who had organized the event, found himself in possession of perhaps the most valuable piece of boxing footage ever recorded. The film showed two legends at their most vulnerable and competitive, engaged in a battle that had pushed both men to their absolute limits. In the days following the exhibition, word began to spread throughout the boxing community about what had transpired in that Miami gym. Reporters who had been denied access began investigating, trying to piece together details from the few witnesses who had been present. The secrecy surrounding the event only added to its mystique and importance. The exhibition had lasting effects on both fighters' careers and legacies. For Ali, it served as a reminder that his youth and speed, while formidable, were not guarantees of success against truly great opponents. The experience taught him valuable lessons about respecting his opponents and the importance of preparation and strategy. For Louis, the exhibition provided a final moment of glory and relevance in a sport that had largely moved past his era. His performance against Ali proved that his skills, while diminished, remained formidable enough to challenge even the most talented young fighters. The boxing world would never be quite the same after that day in Miami. The exhibition had demonstrated that the sport's greatest moments often occurred away from the bright lights and television cameras, in small gyms where legends could test themselves against each other without the pressure of public expectations and commercial considerations. Years later, when both fighters had retired and the footage was finally released, it would be recognized as one of the most important documents in boxing history. The exhibition captured not just a fight between two great champions, but a moment when the past and future of boxing collided in the most dramatic and authentic way possible. Hey, my friends, help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth.